Hey everybody, welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo. Hope you guys are ready to go. Whoo, I am. I've already been outside doing some work on the yard after that nice rain. Super cool. Soil's nice and soft. Really opportunity to get out there and get some stuff done, some work done. But anyway, it's good to see you. Let me put on my green hat because it's so cool and it reminds me of a good friend who passed away. So I'm going to put on that. And now I think I'm ready to go, for the Morning Devo. We're going to be in the book of Leviticus, chapter 17 and 18 today. Super interesting section of scripture. And so let's read it. And you can always check out the archives of the Devos at my YouTube channel at Bo Willett. Last name Ouellettete, Bo Willett, YouTube. It's live there right now as well. But sometimes it's not so live there at YouTube. So the Facebook page at Calvary Christian is much more consistent, but I do try to put it up on YouTube as often live. So anyway, let's get into it. Leviticus. Sorry, did I say Exodus before? Leviticus 17. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the Israelites, and say to them, this is what is commanded. Any Israelite who sacrifices an ox, a lamb, or a goat in the camp or outside of it." So any sacrifices, right? Instead of bringing it to the entrance to the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord in front of the tabernacle of the Lord, that man shall be considered guilty of bloodshed. He has shed blood and must be cut off from his people. This is so the Israelites will bring to the Lord the sacrifices they are now making in the open fields. They must bring them to the priest, that is to the Lord, at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and sacrifice them as fellowship offerings. Isn't that cool? So you can't just be, willy-nilly with the sacrifices like you once were in Egypt. Israel hung out in Egypt. They were used to that. They were used to sacrificing. Egypt had many gods. So Israel could easily fall into the trap of just going out into the woods, man, and just doing sacrifices out there, building their own altar, doing it their way, right? Going their business. Hey, man, why listen to God? I know more than God. Have that kind of attitude. I know where I can worship. Who's God to say that I can't take my wonderful cow and go out into the woods and just butcher it out there? No, the blood was to be precious. It was to be sacred. There's a reason why. We'll get to that. And it was to be, this command was given so that they realized that God wanted to have fellowship with them, to bring the offerings before God, the tent of meeting, the place where God meets with his people. And that way they can present those sacrifices as fellowship offerings. Did you catch that? Yeah, as a fellowship offering. Hey, you want to have some fellowship? Hey, man, you bring God right into it. Isn't that cool? It's almost like before you eat a meal, right? You kind of in your mind, you thank the Lord for it, right? You have that prayer mind where you're like, God, I bring this before you. I thank you, for the sustenance that you give me. I want you to know that I am thankful. I want to have fellowship with you, God. That kind of attitude. And I love that. It's bringing that just heart before God, right? That, hey, I want to have fellowship with the Lord, even in the barbecue, right? Even in the time when you're in the backyard, just kicking back with people. I want to bring God into that kind of thing. So that's what they were to do. They're not to go back to kind of the old ways, some of the pagan ways, what we call the pagan ways, or the ways of the people that were into idolatry. Not to get into those habits, but to bring these sacrifices when blood is spilt, to bring that before God. And realizing that the blood itself, the life that is taken from that animal, is precious as well. And that needs to be brought before God in a fellowship offering, that you can have fellowship with the Lord. So hey, when you eat food, when you're eating whatever you're eating, learning to be thankful, learning to have fellowship. So it says that. It says the priest is to sprinkle the blood against the altar of the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So the priest is involved, right? The priest takes the blood and puts that before the Lord. They must no longer offer any of their sacrifices to the goat idols. Whoa, hairy goat idols. Yeah, so don't do what you used to be a part of, or what you remembered back in the land of Egypt. Now you got to remember, Israel was in Egypt for how long? 400 years. So that's a long time, and you can develop some pretty gnarly habits in that period. And so it was easy for Israel to just simply go back to doing what they were used to doing with animal sacrifices and the superstitions of the day. And to prevent them from getting back into those superstitions, you were to bring things to the tabernacle. And I find this cool too, is, church, going to church, there's something about it, about when I'm at church, I'm not doing everything that, is like my old life, right? When I'm at church, I'm focused on the Lord, And Bob says, I can develop gnarly habits in a week. Yeah, totally, let alone 400 years. But, bringing the offerings to the tabernacle is like going to church. It's like bringing, your life before God in the church with the body of Christ. And, and it's something where that when you're there, when I'm at the fellowship, then I'm not necessarily doing what I used to be doing, out in the street, or out carousing, or doing whatever you were doing, at the bar, whatever you were doing, being greedy, that kind of thing, whatever, but you get the point, is that, bringing your offering to the tabernacle was like bringing things before God. In Israel, everything was to be brought before the Lord. Isn't that cool? Everything was to be brought before the Lord. It wasn't just to be on your own. Now, we are to bring God in everything as well. God is in everything. He is everything to us. So, man, when we do have a barbecue, man, we thank the Lord. Man, when we eat a meal, we thank the Lord. Hey, man, I got a scoop of ice cream. Whoa, I thank the Lord, man. What a wonderful treat that is, right? Chocolate chip, 31 flavors. Super cool. Peanut butter cookie. Hey, thank you, God. I always like peanut butter cookies. So it says, then say to them, any Israelite or alien living among them, and remember, it's okay, you could be a non-quote Israelite and live among the Israelites. And if you offer a burnt offering or sacrifice and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to the Lord, that man shall be cast from his people. You're going to be cut off from the people of Israel. This is going to be a nation where God's going to be their people. We are to bring the offerings before the Lord. Any Israelite or alien living among you who eats any blood. Now, this is interesting. Very underlying passage. One of those ones where you get out the highlighter. Where's my highlighter? Right there. There's a highlighter. And I get it. And I'm using a newer Bible that I haven't used that much. But this is going to be a big one for me. Any Israelite or alien living among you who eats any blood. Now remember, blood is a big thing in Leviticus. We're going to get why here. It says, I will set my face against the person who eats blood and will cut him off from his people. For the life of the creature is in the blood, and I have given it to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. Therefore, I say to the Israelites, none of you may eat blood. And it says, not an alien living among you shall eat blood. Anybody. No Israelite, nobody. And so, very important passage, right? Life is in the what? Blood. Life is that you drain the blood out of me, I die. My life is in my blood. The animal's blood is precious to God. Why? Because it's used to make atonement for your sin. That's why. And so that blood is sprinkled on the tent of meeting. It's that barrier between a holy God and unrighteous people. So think about that. You have God on one side, you have people on the other side, and you have blood that is the atonement. It is the covering. So God meets at the tent of meeting. His presence is going to be there. And then there's blood that is sprinkled all over the tent of meeting in different parts, compartments of it. And it's a barrier between unholy people. So all the blood that was shed, that Israel was to shed, it wasn't to be something that was just secular or just, common. It was to be something that they were to realize and reverence that blood and know that that blood was special, that there's something amazing about that blood. That blood is doing something to prevent us from facing a holy God in our sin, just face to face. Light, again, the switch goes on, darkness comes right off. It's done. Darkness is out. Light overcomes the darkness. And so we don't get overcome, there's this blood barrier. Isn't that interesting? Jesus, his blood is what covers our sin, right? He is the mediator between man and God, right? 2 Timothy chapter 1 tells us that. Jesus is the mediator. And isn't that cool? Man, Jesus is the mediator. Now, it goes into this idea, again, of, blood and the importance of it. It talks about anyone who hunts, right? Any hunters out there, an animal, bird eaten, they must drain out the blood to cover it with earth, because the life of every creature is in its blood. That's why I've said to the Israelites, you must not eat the blood. So whatever you're doing, if you're hunting, if you're sacrificing, the blood is vital. It's important. It's something to be treated with reverence, that kind of idea. And so then it gets into chapter 18. And I wanted to read 18 with 17 because I thought it would be important for you to understand kind of this idea that, God is setting up these laws for specific reasons. And one of them is because certainly they're going to be dwelling with a holy God. But another reason is that God knows the tendency of us to go back to, in a sense, our old ways. It's very easy to do it. And so this is kind of why he does it. And yeah, it would be interesting. All of a sudden you go to the camp of Israel, and all of a sudden Israel's like, hey man, this is how we treat blood. And this is why we treat blood. And Dad, a little kid would go, Mom, why do we put the blood in the ground, when we're hunting? Or why do we drain the animal of its blood? And why do we take good, care of the blood? Or why do we only sacrifice at the tabernacle? You would say, because blood is important, because life is in the blood, and our life should be taken before God. Because God is holy and we have broken God's laws, but God has used the blood, the life of an animal, as an atonement for our sins. See, it would be like a way to teach your kids and your family about God and the nature of God through these laws. And so these laws would promote us teaching about the nature and the character of God. And here's one of them. It's that in chapter 18, it's going to be very easy to go back to maybe what they knew in Egypt. And one of the areas that is easy for us to get loopy in is our sexuality. That's not weird because humans are sexual beings. So we shouldn't freak out about that. And holding fast to Adam and Eve, the one man, one woman for life, is super difficult. And let me just say this, in the far minority on the planet. Most people on this planet have not lived their life with simply just one sexual partner. That's not the normal. Adam and Eve is a very, very, very rare exception. There are people that do this. There are people that have never engaged in any kind of sexual intercourse until they married someone and they stayed in a monogamous binary relationship their entire lives and never, ever, ever, ever departed from that. I don't know what the percentage is, but that has got to be small. In my lifetime of almost 50 years of living, I don't know too many people that have done that. Maybe you might know a person, a couple that got married young and they never engaged in any kind of intimacy before that, and they stayed their whole marriage together forever until they died. But on the whole, most of us, we have strayed from the Adam and Eve, one man, one woman for life, right? Yeah, it just hasn't worked. People have gotten divorced. People have entered into other relationships. People grew up dating different people, having intimacy. People are not so monogamous. They're polygynous, or they're polyandry, or they're polyamorous. There's many different relationals formats that happen in the world, and they've always been on the planet. Don't ever think otherwise. They just always have been on the planet. We've always gone different directions, and there's no doubt that God is concerned about our sexuality, and that's something that we find. Bob says he Googled it and it's 5%. Yeah, I wouldn't even believe it's 5%. I would think it's even less than that, but 5% is pretty low, because I'm talking about a person who never has been with anybody else. But, maybe it is 5%. And I don't know how they would be able to kind of get that statistic anyway, but that's pretty small, 5%, that's pretty tiny too. So, but God is concerned about our intimacy, because intimacy points to, again, the nature of God. And God's laws are there to point to something of his nature. Thanks, Bob, for clarifying that was Americans. But yeah, the laws are there to point to something about God's nature. And that's how sexuality is too. It's something that points to about the nature of God. And so here's a wonderful breakdown. And I don't find this weird at all myself. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You must not do as they do in Egypt." You kind of get the point. "Where you used to live, you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you. Do not follow their practices or follow their ways, but follow my decrees. I am the Lord your God. Keep my decrees and laws. For the man who obeys them will live by them. I am the Lord." And so no one is to approach any close relative and to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. "Do not dishonor your father by having sexual relations with your mother. She is your mother, and do not have relations with her. Do not have sexual relations with your father's wife. That would be dishonoring to your father." Now, I got to tell you that the Israelites broke these. This is something that as we go through the Bible, we'll see that they broke. Even some of the more famous people in the Bible have broken these sexual laws. Again, very small percentage of people ever on the planet, I imagine, have not broken laws, God's sexual laws. One man, one woman, for life. That's it. One, the end. No different. One man, one woman. That's it. The end. When you think of that, you think, man, that's hardcore. And that's right. It is hardcore, man. That's right. That's what God intended. When God built the TV, he intended it to be a certain way, right? Right? You don't use the TV for a hammer, man. That's not what you do. It's not built for that, right? And God built us one man, one woman for life. It's to shine something about God, the intimate commitment and work of God, the essence of God, who God is, what God is like. That's all what God is doing when he creates man, Adam, and Eve, woman, and bringing them into, and then the potential of a third, right? The baby. Man, amazing, right? And so he makes Adam and Eve one, and their family one, and God is what? One. God is one God too. There's an amazing truth in there. So it says, don't have sexual relationships with your father's wife, right? Do not have sexual relationships with your sister. It says, don't have sexual relations with your son's daughters or your daughter's daughters. That would be dishonoring. Do not have sexual relations with your daughter of your father's wife born to your father. She is your sister. Do not have sexual relations with your father's sister. She is your father's close relative. Do not have sexual relations with your mother's sister because she is your mother's close relative. Don't dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife to have sexual relations with her. She is your aunt. Don't have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. Do not have sexual relations with your brother's wife. Do not have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughters. Do not have sexual relations with either her son's daughters or daughter's daughters. They are close relatives. That is wickedness. Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife is living. Do not approach a woman to have sexual relations during the uncleanness of her monthly period, right? So you can see the breakdown of these sexual relationships. Now, obviously, a lot of people read this and they just go, man, this is crazy. But it's not crazy. It's not crazy at all. I mean, just open up your eyes a little bit to our world. Our world is filled with all kinds of sexual relationships, all kinds. It's always been. This is what the Bible's saying Egypt was like and what Canaan was like. But it's not just Egypt and Canaan. All of our lives, so many of our lives have been affected by interesting sexuality, sexual practices, things that maybe shouldn't have happened that did happen to you. Someone in your family maybe took advantage of you. Things like that, sensitive things that we go, man, that was wrong. Well, this is what God is telling the people of Israel, is they are to live different in this intimate life. And their intimate life is to be really something that God is aware of and God sees and God is a part of. And even this morning, I want to make sure that I realize that God is a part of my sexual life, that God wants to be a part of it. And God sees it, that there's nothing I can hide from the Creator. Everything is before Him. Let me bring those things before Him. The hurts, the pains, the issues that have happened, let me bring those things before Him. So God is going to be God of the people of Israel. And He says, hey, you guys are going to be different. Yeah, people are going to think you're a little loony. Yeah, it's going to be, because you're going to be in that 5%. You're going to be in that 2%, You're going to be in that small percent, that maybe 1%, you're going to be in that small percentile, but that is, you're going to be different, and there's a reason. It's to point people to something about God, this is what it's all about. So it says, don't have sexual relationships even with your neighbor's wife. Love your neighbor's wife, but not like that. Don't lust your neighbor's wife, right? Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech. Just don't do what these people have done in the past. Don't just give your kids over to Molech, right? Sacrifice your children for your own vanity, for your own purposes, right? Oh, man. Does Molech worship still happen? Woo, big question. For you must not profane the name of your God. Again, it represents, you're representing God. That's how it's looking. Very interesting, right? Tamara says, creates many drug addicts. This abuse does. So true. Such a good point. Such a good point. That's right. A lot of us, when you go through difficult things growing up, especially with intimacy, sometimes you do drugs just to get away from maybe some of the shame or the guilt or some of the weirdness of it all, and that happens all the time. So, do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. That is detestable. Do not have sexual relations with an animal and defile yourself with it. A woman must not present herself to an animal to have sexual relationships with it. That is a perversion. Bestiality. Has it been in the world forever? Yeah, certainly has. People are, we will do whatever. That's how human beings work, And so one man, one woman for life, that is it for the people of Israel. That's all she wrote, And yeah, is it small percent? Is it tiny? Is it not much movement? Not much opportunity for other things? That's all true. That's right. It is, my pleasure is something to be restrained and harnessed. It's not to be something where I just go wherever it's going to take me, or else I will go everywhere and anywhere. Every human being has the potential to do everything that is written here. Every human being has the potential to do that, right? It's not that we all will, but we certainly have the potential to do that, and I need to realize that before God, that God, I can go astray so simply, so easily if I follow my lustful inclinations, my lustful desires. Help me to bring all this before you. And that's what it is, right? Do not defile yourself in any of these ways. And he says, because of these things, right? And how these nations are what they're doing, I am going to drive them out before you, right? Even the land was defiled because of the way they were behaving. I will punish it for its sin, and the land vomited out of its inhabitants. The land, in a sense, gets defiled because of all the corruption. And the picture is the land is vomiting the people from the land. The people are going to be kicked out of the land. The land is literally crying out for these people to be removed because of the defilement, the blood that has saturated the land, the children's blood that has seeped into the soil, right? Reminds us a little bit of Cain and Abel, right? Cain kills Abel, and the blood of Abel cries out to God. The writer of Hebrews talks about that in the New Testament, for justice, right? This idea that the earth itself is crying out. We see a picture of that in the New Testament too when it comes to Romans chapter 8. The earth, the whole universe is crying out, waiting for righteousness to reign. In Romans 8, it talks about. Very cool. Jesus said the rocks will cry out, right? If you don't worship me, Jesus said the rocks will cry out when he was coming into Jerusalem in his last week. Very interesting passage, right? The earth itself sees the blood of the innocent, and it is crying out, wanting to kick out the people that have corrupted it. Wow, very unique. Very Greenpeace, man. I mean, God is super, the earth is important, the soil is important, the land is important. And he says, you must keep my laws, keep my laws so that you don't enter into this, so the land doesn't become defiled. So God's laws are there to protect the earth, to protect the planet. You want to protect the planet? Maybe we got to follow God better, right? Maybe that's the answer, right? Maybe it's not everything else that we're trying to do, but maybe it's us just coming into this right relationship with God that's going to help us. Yeah, so interesting passage, right? And I find it way cool. What a beautiful thing that God is so involved. He's so involved in the earth. He's so involved with me, and he's so involved with my intimate life, and he's so involved in things and learning to bring things before God all the time. Go to the tent of meeting, bring the offering before the Lord, draw close to Jesus, have Jesus be in every part of my life so I don't go back to the things, so I can glorify God, so I can shine his attributes. And now I start being a true image bearer of God. I start being that true image bearer where I am now bearing the image of my Creator. His laws are on me, and I'm reflecting those laws and not my own ways, not my narcissism, my selfishness, those kind of things. And collectively, individually, Israel is to be doing this with their God. So very cool passage, man. I hope you guys got a lot out of that. I just find this book absolutely the bomb, man. Super cool. So many things to think about and learn about. And you guys have a great day, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.